Hi, I'm Marin. I let my sister stay in my apartment, just for a little while. But then her boyfriend moved in. He changed the locks. He made house rules. For me. I came home one day and my name wasn't on anything anymore. Not the door, not the bills, not even the truth. They threw parties, trashed my furniture, sold things that mattered to me, and then told everyone I was the problem. You ever wonder how far family will go when they assume you'll never fight back? Well, I stopped knocking. Want to know what happened next? Sunday afternoons used to mean something. A hot mug of Earl Grey, my feet tucked under a throw blanket, and a rerun of some cooking show humming in the background. Nothing urgent, nothing loud. That afternoon was no different. Or at least it wasn't supposed to be. Then my phone buzzed. Mom. I didn't answer immediately. Her calls often came packaged with a side of emotional sabotage, and right on cue, when I finally picked up, she didn't waste a second. Hi, sweetheart. How's my hardworking girl? That sugary tone, too sweet to be casual, too practiced to be sincere, set off alarm bells. I'm good, Mom. Just relaxing. What's up? There was a pause, just long enough to signal a pivot. Well, your sister's going through a rough patch. And there it was. She just needs a little help. Her lease ended unexpectedly, and she doesn't have the funds to move into a new place right away. I let her words hang in the air. The apartment. She meant the old one, the one I fought to keep after the divorce. She has nowhere to go, Marin, and you have that place just sitting there. I closed my eyes, already knowing how this conversation would end. I wanted to say no. I wanted to protect my peace, my property, my boundaries. But saying no to Mom meant months of passive-aggressive jabs during family dinners. I need it rented, I said slowly. That income offsets my mortgage. I know, honey, I do. But you're doing well now. You've got your new place, your job. You've bounced back. That last part cut deeper than she realized. I bounced back because I had that apartment to fall on, I muttered. That wasn't luck. That was survival. So help your sister survive, she said simply, like I hadn't just explained that exact thing. I could already hear her retelling this to my aunts like a martyr. All I asked was a favor. Fine, I finally breathed. She can stay there, temporarily. Thank you, sweetheart. You're an angel. She hung up before I could tack on any conditions. A week passed before I saw Sorrel. She showed up at the apartment 10 minutes late with a pair of oversized sunglasses and a venti iced latte in hand, like she was on her way to a beach shoot. Hey, she chirped. Thanks again, sis. Seriously. Her hug was quick, borderline performative. I unlocked the apartment and let her in. The space looked the same. Neutral paint, basic furniture I'd left behind, a faint trace of lavender from the diffuser I'd set up last month. I've only got a few bags, she said, hauling in far more than a few. Oh, and Knox might swing by here and there. I turned to her. Knox? She shrugged. My boyfriend. He's helping me move stuff. Don't worry, he's chill. That wasn't what I asked. I cleared my throat. Look, a few ground rules, okay? No overnight guests, no parties, don't move furniture, and if you want to do anything major, just call me first. She waved her hand. Totally fair. It wasn't reassurance. It was dismissal wrapped in a smile. 2 days later, I stopped by to drop off her insurance paperwork. She hadn't answered my texts, and I figured she was out. I still had my key, so I let myself in. The door creaked open into something off. Music played softly in the background. Indie rock, something with a lazy beat. And there, lounging on the couch like it was his personal throne, was a man I'd never seen before. He looked up, completely unfazed. You're Marin? I stood frozen in the doorway. Knox, he added, pointing to himself with 2 fingers, like he expected a gold star. Sorrel told me you were intense. I blinked. Sorry, who are you? I finally asked, even though I already knew. Her boyfriend. We've kind of been staying here. I opened my mouth, then closed it. I was too stunned to respond. I turned on my heel and walked back to the hallway, dialing Sorrel. She answered on the 3rd ring, bubbly as ever. Hey, sis. Is Knox living in my apartment? There was a pause. Well, he's just crashing a few nights a week. You said temporary, right? That was for you. Another pause. It's not a big deal, she said breezily. Don't blow this up. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I didn't even argue. I just hung up. That night, I sat in my kitchen spooning cereal into my mouth while scrolling through rental listings. Not for her, for myself. I wasn't leaving my home, but I needed to remind myself what boundaries looked like. I opened the Notes app on my phone and typed, "Funny how being nice makes people forget it's still your place." I stared at the blinking cursor for a few seconds, then typed another line. "Tomorrow, I'll drop by again. This time, I'll knock like a stranger. Let's see if they open the door." The sky was heavy that morning, a solid stretch of gray clouds hanging low over Portland like a warning. I pulled into the apartment parking lot with a container of pumpkin muffins and a sense of unease that hadn't left me since my last visit. There was no real reason for the muffins. I think part of me hoped that some homemade gesture would soften what I already suspected was going to be an awkward interaction. I climbed the familiar stairwell, balancing the tray in one hand and my purse in the other, and stopped in front of the door. I knocked once, firm but polite. No answer. I tried the key. It didn't turn. Confused, I pulled it out, checked the number again as if I'd somehow wandered to the wrong unit, then tried a second time. Same result. Completely jammed. I knocked again, this time louder. Footsteps shuffled inside. The door opened a crack, and there he was. Knox, barefoot, shirtless, and absolutely unbothered. "Oh, hey," he said, like I was a neighbor asking to borrow sugar. "Didn't know you were coming by. We changed the locks last week." I blinked. "You did what?" He opened the door wider, leaned casually against the frame. "Yeah, just didn't feel safe with all the foot traffic, you know?" "This is my apartment," I said, my voice low but firm. Knox tilted his head, as if I'd just spoken in Morse code. "Sure, technically, but we're living here now, so we figured it made sense." "We?" He gave me a smug smile. "Yeah, Sorrel and I talked about it. It's about safety and boundaries. Look, I actually wrote up some ground rules to keep things smooth." He disappeared inside before I could respond. I stood frozen, one hand still clutching the tray of muffins like a peace offering in a war that had just been declared. When he returned, he handed me a single sheet of paper, folded in thirds. "It's just so we all feel safe and respected here," he said, as if that somehow justified what he'd done. I unfolded the paper slowly. My eyes scanned the list. Visits require 72 hours notice. No entry after 7 p.m. No discussions about bills or payments. No surprise inspections. Emotional tone must remain calm and respectful. I read it again, stunned at the audacity. Emotional tone? This man who just changed my locks without permission wanted to police my emotional tone? My fingers clenched the paper tightly, but I didn't let it tear. "Where's Sorrel?" I asked, my voice measured. "She's resting," he said, stepping back inside. "Want me to pass a message?" I didn't answer. I just stared at him until the door closed in my face. The hallway smelled like sandalwood incense and burnt toast. It used to smell like fresh paint and lavender when I lived there. I turned around, walked back down the stairs, and headed straight for my car. Once inside, I placed the muffins on the passenger seat, started the engine, and sat in silence for a moment. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't even curse, although every cell in my body begged me to. Instead, I drove. Not home, not yet. I needed movement, a loop around the city, a distraction from the betrayal that had just sunk its claws deeper than I expected. By the time I got back to my place, it was dusk, and the air had turned colder. The kind that seeps into your bones and makes you feel like winter's already moved in. I took the paper out of my coat pocket and laid it on the kitchen table under the overhead light. I highlighted each rule in red marker like I was grading an unearned term paper. I stared at the words until the letters blurred, then snapped a photo and saved it to a folder I labeled Legal Proof. That night, I didn't watch TV. I didn't call Mom. I didn't journal. I opened my laptop, created a new Word document, and titled it Occupancy Agreement Emergency Termination Draft. I typed for an hour straight, bullet points, citations, references to Oregon tenant law. I even attached a PDF of the property deed with my name clearly printed in bold. And then, I stopped. I read the entire document from start to finish, let out a slow exhale, and dragged my mouse to the trash icon. Deleted. Not yet. Not like this. They needed to feel it, not in a legal envelope, not in court, not even in a shouted argument. They needed to feel the shift. That moment when the person they underestimated chooses silence, not submission. I poured a glass of wine, sat back in my chair, and stared out the window. I'd given them time. I'd given them shelter. I'd given them the benefit of the doubt. Now, I was going to give them consequences. The rain started just before dawn, a quiet tapping against the windows that reminded me of everything I hadn't said yet. Portland always knew how to set a mood. I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop open, the cursor blinking over my banking portal. Just routine, I told myself. Pay the mortgage, check utilities, move on. But something didn't look right. The electric bill was nearly double. I blinked and refreshed the page. Still the same. Water usage spiked, the Wi-Fi plan somehow upgraded. I hadn't touched the account. I picked up my phone and sent Sorrel a text. Hey, have you noticed the utilities? They're way higher this month. She responded 10 minutes later. Oh, yeah, Knox said the heater's been glitchy. Maybe that's it? That's it? I wasn't buying it. Knox couldn't fix a flat tire, let alone diagnose HVAC issues. And why would a broken heater cause the Wi-Fi to triple? A chill passed over me. Not from the rain or the air, but from something sharper. Suspicion. That afternoon I stepped out for groceries but ended up circling back toward the old apartment. I hadn't planned on it. I just found myself taking a left where I usually turned right. The street was quiet, a little too quiet for mid-afternoon. The blinds were drawn, the porch light on in broad daylight. It looked occupied. I didn't knock. I didn't need to. I just stared up at the mailbox built into the wall near the stairs. I'd set up forwarding for all my mail when I moved, but sometimes institutions still sent things to my old address, out of habit or laziness. Later that evening, after putting away groceries and trying, and failing, to focus on a work report, I logged into my bank's customer service chat. Can you confirm where my last 2 statements were mailed? The agent typed. Yes, last 2 paper statements were sent to old apartment address. Delivered last Thursday. Delivered, but not received. I hung up and called Sorrel. No answer. I called again. Still nothing. The next morning, I drove back. This time I brought coffee, decoy hospitality. Knox opened the door again, wearing a t-shirt with a cartoon skull and plaid pajama pants. Morning, he mumbled. I gave him a tight smile. Have you seen any mail for me? Bank statements? They should have come last week. He shrugged. We tossed junk mail. Didn't see anything with your name on it. I looked past him into the living room. Packages, envelopes, and flyers were scattered across the table like confetti. Can I just take a look myself? He stepped forward, blocking the entrance. I'd rather not. Sorrel's asleep. You get it, right? Right. I turned back toward the stairs without another word. On the way down, my jaw tightened so hard I thought my teeth might crack. I didn't even glance at my car until I was sitting inside it, engine off, hands gripping the steering wheel. I'd warned her. 2 months earlier, we were at Mom and Dad's for dinner. Sorrel had pulled a face when I asked her not to mess with mail sent to the old place. It's not just junk, I told her. It's not just paper. It's linked to my identity, my accounts. She'd laughed, wine glass in hand. Okay, boss lady, chill. I should have known then. The red flags weren't subtle. They were practically waving in slow motion. Back home, I opened a fresh folder on my desktop and labeled it Violation Log, Apartment B. I started typing. Unauthorized lock change, unauthorized occupant, mail interference, utility spike, account tampering. The list went on. I paused halfway through, ran my fingers through my hair, and picked up my phone again. I need access to the mailbox next time I visit, I texted. No reply. A full hour passed. Then 2, nothing. She was online, her little green status dot glowing like mockery, but apparently silent. That evening I made dinner and tried to pretend the roast chicken meant something comforting, something stable, but all I could think about was the envelope I hadn't received, the bills they weren't paying, the locks I didn't own anymore. Later that night, I left a sticky note on my fridge. When you take back what's yours, do it without shaking. I folded the utility bills and tucked them into a red file folder. My fingers trembled, but I steadied them, opened my vanity drawer, and applied lipstick with the precision of a woman preparing for war. Looking at my reflection, I whispered, "Next visit, I'm not knocking." Saturday rolled in with the kind of wind that rattled the gutters and sent brittle leaves scraping along the sidewalk like they were trying to flee something. I had just poured a cup of chamomile tea when my phone rang. Caller ID, Mrs. Varela. The older woman from across the hall at the old apartment wasn't someone who called unless something was wrong. I put the mug down and answered. "I'm sorry to bother you, dear," she said, her voice thin and cautious. "But there's been a lot of noise coming from your unit, almost every night this week. Loud music, many people coming and going, very late. It's not like before." My stomach twisted. "I'm really sorry, Mrs. Varela," I said. "I'll take care of it." I stood by the window, staring out at the bare branches trembling against the gray sky. How many nights had I spent rationalizing, holding back, giving them another chance? Tonight was different. I changed out of my loungewear, threw on a jacket, and grabbed my bag. On the drive over, my grip on the steering wheel tightened with each turn. I didn't listen to music, didn't check messages. I didn't even rehearse what I would say. By the time I parked in front of the building, the sun had completely sunk. From the outside, I could already hear the bass, low, relentless, pulsing through the walls like a heartbeat, the kind of sound you feel in your chest before you hear it in your ears. The hallway smelled like beer, weed, and something burnt. I knocked on the door once. No answer. I tried the key. Still nothing. The lock they'd changed hadn't been for security. It was to keep me out. I knocked again, louder this time. A few moments later, the door cracked open. A girl I'd never seen before peeked out, chewing gum, her mascara slightly smudged. She tilted her head and smirked. "Oh, are you the landlady?" she asked, like she already knew. Before I could respond, Knox appeared behind her, red plastic cup in hand, wearing an oversized hoodie like this was a college dorm party. "Hey, Marin," he said, grinning like nothing was wrong. "Sorry, little get-together. We kept it small." I pushed the door open wider and stepped inside without waiting for permission. The air reeked of stale alcohol and cheap cologne. My antique side table, one I'd inherited from my grandmother, had beer cans stacked on it like it was a recycling station. People were slouched on the couch, on the floor, even on the windowsill. Someone had spilled something sticky near the kitchen, and the wood looked warped. I scanned the faces and didn't recognize a single one. "I want everyone out. Now!" I said, not yelling, just clear. Sorrel emerged from the back, barefoot and holding a wine glass. Her cheeks were flushed, and her expression somewhere between annoyance and amusement. "Seriously?" she said, rolling her eyes. "You could have at least sent a text." I stared at her. I shouldn't need an invitation to walk into my own apartment. Knox stepped between us, arms slightly raised. "Relax, it's just one night." I looked him dead in the eye. It's been one night every night, apparently. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. I turned to the strangers. "Party's over, now." A few people stood awkwardly. One guy muttered something under his breath as he passed me, but I didn't flinch. I wasn't there to argue. I was there to reclaim. Sorrel set her glass down with unnecessary force. "You always have to make everything so dramatic." "No," I said. "I make things clear. That's different." She scoffed. "God, you sound like Mom." That hit harder than she knew, but I didn't give her the satisfaction of seeing it. As the apartment emptied, I did a final sweep. My bookshelf had been rearranged. My lamp had a crack near the base. The rug I'd chosen so carefully now had dark stains near the edges. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I didn't even look back at her when I walked out. "Next time," I said, loud enough for them both to hear, "I won't be this polite." By the time I got back to my car, the night had turned colder. The wind pushed against me like it, too, was tired of being ignored. As I unlocked the driver's side door, my phone buzzed. A message from Sorrel. "You're making this a lot harder than it has to be." I stared at it. Then, with a calm I didn't feel, I unlocked my phone, opened my email, and clicked Compose. Subject: Notice of lease violation informal. I hit send on the email, leaned back in my chair, and waited for the screen to feel less like a battlefield. It didn't. The subject line glared back at me like a warning flare. Notice of lease violation informal. I wasn't playing games anymore, and I wasn't going to let anyone else rewrite the rules. By the time Saturday dinner came around, I was still fuming, but I showed up. Dad grilled as usual, humming to a Sinatra tune from his tinny Bluetooth speaker, while Mom moved in and out of the kitchen with serving bowls like it was just another family meal. I helped out, trying to keep my face neutral, sipping on club soda and counting the minutes until I could leave. Sorrel didn't come. Apparently too tired, Mom said, then followed it up with a tight smile and, "You two really need to talk." I didn't answer. Dinner was quiet. Too quiet. Small talk about weather, traffic, Mom's new succulents that were thriving in this moody Portland rain. The roast was slightly overcooked. The mashed potatoes were underseasoned, but that wasn't what made it hard to swallow. Dessert came, pecan pie, and while we passed plates, Mom struck. Like she'd been waiting for the exact moment my guard was lowest. "Sweetie," she began, using that voice she reserves for requests she knows won't go over well. "If you're not really using the apartment anymore, maybe it's time to, put Sorrel's name on it, just for simplicity." The room went silent. I set my fork down slowly. "Excuse me?" Mom smoothed her napkin in her lap, pretending not to notice my reaction. "Well, it would give her some stability. She's been through a lot too. You've already got your place now. You've moved on." My gaze darted to Dad. He didn't meet my eyes. He shifted in his seat, suddenly fascinated by his empty coffee mug. "Moved on," I echoed. "Because I bought a place with my own credit? Paid every dime without help? That's what moving on looks like?" She sighed, like I was being unreasonable. "You're doing so well, and Sorrel's still figuring things out. You've always been the grounded one. You could help her feel that too." I stared at her. It felt like looking at someone I didn't recognize. "That apartment isn't just extra space," I said. "It's how I survived. When Mark walked out, and I was drowning in legal fees and paperwork and loneliness, that apartment was the one thing I had left that he didn't take." She pressed her lips together. "Yes, but that was 2 years ago, Marin. And it still matters." Dad finally spoke, voice low. "Maybe. It wouldn't be the worst thing, if it helps the family." I laughed, just once, sharp and bitter. "Of course, there it is. The family card." Flashbacks hit me in waves. Every time Sorrel flaked out and I covered for her. Every chore I did growing up while she got one more chance. Every pat on the back she got for mediocrity while I had to break myself for a nod. "You know what this feels like?" I asked, looking between them. "It feels like a transaction, like every favor I've ever given just got an invisible price tag stuck on it." Mom reached across the table, palm up. "We're not attacking you. You're being very defensive." I didn't take her hand. "I'm being consistent," I said. "For once in my life, I'm not bending. Not for guilt, not for comfort, not for someone else's convenience." I stood, placing my napkin gently on my plate. "I will not give up that apartment. Not now. Not ever. It's mine. Legally, emotionally, all of it." Mom looked wounded. Dad just looked old. I didn't wait for them to speak. I walked out, coat still draped over the chair. The drizzle had started up again, cold and unrelenting, as I got into my car and closed the door behind me like a vault. The silence inside felt heavier than it should have. Back home, I poured myself a glass of water and sat at my desk. I opened the drawer and pulled out the title deed, smoothing it out like it was a sacred relic. My name. Not Sorrel's, not Mom's, not anyone else's. "They want to talk names?" I murmured. I picked up my phone and dialed my lawyer. "Let's talk contracts." I didn't sleep that night. The quiet hum of my apartment, once soothing, felt like a warning siren muffled under drywall. I spent the early hours pacing. Every creak of the floorboards felt like a breath held too long. Every shadow cast by headlights on the wall looked like something about to collapse. By mid-morning, the rain had returned, not pounding but persistent, a fine, needling drizzle that Portland specialized in. I wrapped a scarf around my neck, grabbed my umbrella, and drove across town to the old apartment. My reason for going was simple. Retrieve a few sentimental things I hadn't had the heart to move. An old photo album and a cardboard box labeled Venice Honeymoon Keepsakes. I knocked once, more out of formality than hope. Knox opened the door with a flat expression, as if I were a mail carrier, not the owner of the space he was lounging in. "I need to grab a couple of things," I said. He tilted his head slightly, casual. "Oh, we got rid of some of that old junk. Thought it was just leftover crap." I stared at him, the words struggling to make sense. "What do you mean, got rid of?" He leaned against the doorframe like this was a regular Tuesday. "That blue vase, sold it. Facebook Marketplace, $50, you're welcome." My hands clenched before I even realized it. That vase wasn't just decoration. It was from Venice, our last peaceful trip before the divorce turned everything sour. I kept it not for the memory of the man, but the moment, the fragile illusion of beauty during chaos. "You sold it?" I repeated flatly. He shrugged. "It was just sitting there." I didn't say another word. I turned and walked out. Back in my car, the heat blasting against my frozen fingers, I sat there in silence. Then my phone rang. Mom. Against my better judgment, I picked up. I didn't say hello, just held the phone to my ear. "What is going on with you?" she demanded immediately. "Sorrel said you barged in and started yelling at Knox." "I didn't yell," I said. "But even if I had, it would have been justified. They sold something that wasn't theirs." She snorted. "You always hold on to things too tightly. Maybe that's why your marriage didn't last." I said nothing. Not because I didn't have words, but because none of them would have landed where they needed to. Her voice cut again through the line like a knife dull from overuse. "You're acting like a tyrant, Marin. Maybe try some empathy for once." I didn't hang up, but I did let the phone fall into my lap, screen still glowing, her voice now muffled and distant like static from another planet. When I got home, I walked straight to my desk, opened my laptop, and started typing. No music, no glass of wine, no journal entry to process what I was feeling. This wasn't a moment for reflection. This was war. Clean, paper-bound, legally defined. I drafted a formal eviction notice. I copied my lawyer on the email. I attached photos. The broken lamp base, the beer stains on the rug, a screenshot of the online listing that still showed the blue vase in the recently sold section. I included screenshots of texts never replied to, the utilities doubled, the mail that vanished, and the rules they had taped on the fridge like I was a tenant in my own property. "If they want to treat me like a stranger," I murmured aloud, "then they'll get the version of me who doesn't knock first, the version who uses certified mail." That night, I printed the letter, folded it carefully, slipped it into a crisp envelope and sealed it with a deliberate press of my palm. On the front, in block letters, I wrote, "To Sorrel and Knox, open immediately." I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel victorious. But for the first time in weeks, I felt solid. 2 days passed. I didn't hear anything after slipping the envelope under their door. No apologies, no messages, not even a passive-aggressive emoji from Sorrel. Just silence. The kind of silence that doesn't feel peaceful. It feels like the breath someone takes before they strike. The strike came at 10:17 a.m. on a Tuesday. I was in a meeting at work, glancing through marketing reports, when a message popped up on my phone. Subject: HOA inquiry, urgent response requested. My stomach flipped. I stepped out into the hallway, opened the email, and stood there frozen beneath the fluorescent lights. The letter was polite, cold, official. "We've received a complaint alleging repeated unannounced visits, verbal intimidation, and disruption of tenant peace. If verified, these actions would constitute a violation of HOA conduct policies. You may be required to request prior written permission to enter the property. Please submit your written response within 72 hours. I read it twice before the words stopped blurring. Knox had gone to the HOA, not just whining. He'd filed a formal complaint against me, in my own building, as if I were the trespasser, the threat. I took it, said nothing. I stared at the screen, jaw tight. Then I whispered, "They're turning my home into evidence, and me into the criminal." Back at my desk, I couldn't focus. I excused myself early and headed to my car. My hands trembled as I turned the keys, but this time it wasn't fear, it was fury. By the time I reached home, I was already pulling up Knox's social profiles. That's when I saw it. A coworker had sent it to me via Slack with the message, is this you? Reddit. Neighborhood Watch subreddit. The title read, "Landlords like this are why we can't have peace." My face was right there, frozen mid-sentence in a still frame from a video I hadn't known existed. The clip showed me banging on the apartment door. No sound, no context. Just a GIF loop with my name blurred out, but only barely. The comments were brutal. Classic Karen energy. Hope the tenants sue her. If she's this unhinged on camera, imagine what she's like off it. One user had connected my face to my LinkedIn profile. Wow, she works in marketing. Explains the fake charm. 400 comments, shares across Facebook, a tweet that was going semi-viral. I didn't cry, I didn't reply. I screen recorded the entire thread and saved every image, every comment. Archived it all in a folder labeled defamation_evident not officially, he said. But yeah, it was always in the background. The air in the room thinned. I didn't shout. I didn't storm off. I just stood up. Tell Mom I'll pick up the last of my things from the apartment today. On the way out, I paused at the doorway, my hand on the frame. She never thought I'd need that place, did she? Dad didn't answer. He didn't have to. By mid-afternoon, I was standing outside the apartment one last time. It looked smaller now, like grief does when you finally stop feeding it. Knox was nowhere in sight. Good. One less face I had to pretend not to despise. Sorrel was packing boxes in the living room, surrounded by the echo of cheap perfume and something that smelled like burned toast. When she saw me, she didn't say hello, just handed me an envelope. Already sealed, she said. C_001. Then I scheduled a meeting with my lawyer. The next morning, I sat across from her in a small office downtown, while she reviewed the footage and printed screenshots. Her demeanor was calm, practiced, but I could see the storm brewing behind her eyes. "You're dealing with someone who's manipulative," she said. "He's controlling the narrative because he knows how it works. Don't fight this emotionally, fight it methodically." We began building our case, a formal cease and desist to the HOA, a detailed rebuttal with photographic evidence of the apartment's damage, screenshots showing Knox and Sorrel denying access and failing to respond, archived Reddit threads, deleted comments, metadata timestamps, everything. "I'm done letting them speak first," I said. My voice didn't shake. I got home that evening and opened my laptop. I clicked reply all to the HOA email, attached all the files. I wrote concisely and without apology my response. I explained how this tenant wasn't on a lease. I explained how my name was on the deed. I submitted formal proof of ownership, legal correspondence, and the eviction notice already in progress. Before I hit send, I added one sentence. "The only person being intimidated here is me." I clicked submit. Then I opened my messages and typed a short text to my lawyer. "Let's file. I'm ready." 3 days after we filed, I found myself pulling into my parents' driveway again. The skies were finally clear, like they'd run out of ways to punish me. The sun didn't warm me, it just lit up the mess more clearly. Mom stayed in the kitchen, rattling pans like she had something to prove. But Dad asked to talk in the den. We sat across from each other, a low hum of the heater filling the gaps in our silence. He looked tired, older than he had a week ago. "There's something you should know," he began, his eyes fixed on the floor between us. "Your mother, she always assumed that when you remarried, you'd move on, that the apartment wouldn't matter anymore." I didn't respond. I just blinked slowly. "She thought," he continued, voice tightening, "that maybe it would be better if Sorrel had it, for stability." "Are you saying this was the plan all along?" I asked, but it didn't even come out as a question. It came out flat, like a diagnosis. He finally looked at me, and I saw it, the guilt, the weariness of a man who didn't agree, but also didn't stop it. As she continued taping a box, I unfolded the note inside. "You win. Enjoy your little kingdom. Maybe if you knew how to love people, you wouldn't always be so alone." I read it twice. No sting, just confirmation. She still thought this was about winning. She still thought she was owed something because she had less. I slipped the letter back into the envelope and tucked it into my coat pocket. Then I looked at her, really looked. "You know what the difference is between us?" I said. "I had to learn how to live without applause." She didn't reply. She just taped the last box like it was the final point in a game I refused to play. By sundown, she was gone. The apartment felt hollow in a different way now, not just empty, but exhaled, like a space finally released from being misused. I walked through each room slowly, running my fingers over surfaces, opening cabinets, closing drawers. No more beer cans, no more strangers' laughter, just quiet. I paused in the bedroom. That was where I'd first curled up after signing my divorce papers, on the floor, with nothing but a throw blanket and a bag of takeout. And yet I'd felt safer then than I had in recent months. A knock on the door snapped me back. The locksmith. He didn't ask questions, just greeted me with a nod and got to work. While he replaced the lock, I stood near the window, arms crossed, watching the sun dip behind the neighboring rooftops. He handed me the new keys 20 minutes later. "All done," he said. I paid, thanked him, and walked him to the door. Once it closed, I locked it, twice, then leaned my forehead against the cool wood. "Done," I whispered. "Finally." The next morning, I woke up to stillness. No unread messages, no lawyers on hold, no dread pacing the hallway outside my bedroom door, just light slipping between the blinds and a strange sense of completion. 1 week later, I brought in a professional cleaning crew. They scrubbed the apartment from top to bottom, scented the air with lemon, and lifted the months of grime out of the corners. It was a necessary reset, one I didn't realize I craved so badly. I kept the windows open the whole day, letting in the early spring air and whatever clarity it decided to carry with it. I repainted the walls myself. Soft almond in the bedroom, crisp white in the living room. Each stroke felt like reclaiming a part of my breath. I swapped out the light fixtures, pulled up the stained rug, replaced it with one I'd picked with intention. Something fresh, something mine. By the second Saturday, I took new photos and listed the apartment online. Clean, quiet, respectful tenants only. A week later, I met the new tenant at the door. Her name was Elise, medical resident, new to Portland, barely older than Sorrel. But the look in her eyes held responsibility, something grounded. She asked thoughtful questions. She signed every page of the lease carefully, no corners skipped. As I handed her the keys, I said, "Respect the space and it'll take care of you." She smiled. "I've been looking for something like this for months, thank you." I watched her walk inside and didn't feel a sting, just a quiet kind of pride. That night I sat on my couch, wine in hand, bare feet curled under me, when my phone lit up. It was a group message. From Mom. "Mom, we know things got messy. Your dad and I hope we can sit down together soon. When you're ready." I didn't reply, but I didn't delete the thread either. I stared at her words for a long time, like they might morph into something less rehearsed. Forgiveness wasn't a prize I was ready to hand out just because someone remembered my name again. And honestly, maybe I was done trying to be the bigger person if it meant always being the one bleeding quietly. I slid the phone face down on the coffee table. 2 days later, I ran into Mrs. Varela in the elevator. "Quiet week," she said, adjusting the strap of her purse. "Glad to see the old noise is gone." I smiled. "You and me both." She leaned in, voice hushed. "I heard Sorrel moved back in with your parents." I figured. "And the boy, what's his name?" "Knox." "Yes, him. Someone said he moved to LA. Apparently that charm doesn't stretch far when the money's not someone else's." I gave a non-committal nod. I wasn't interested in Knox's downfall or Sorrel's regret. I wasn't even interested in closure. They could figure themselves out on someone else's time. What I had was a key that worked, a home that breathed again, and a silence that finally sounded like peace. That weekend, I found it. I was scrolling online, browsing vintage listings I didn't need, when it appeared. The vase. The one from Venice. The one Knox sold for $50. Now? It cost more. Of course it did. But I didn't hesitate. I clicked buy now. When it arrived, I opened the box slowly, peeled away the layers of bubble wrap like something sacred lived inside. It was the same vase. The crack near the base was still there, barely noticeable unless you knew where to look. I ran my fingers over it gently and placed it on the windowsill in my kitchen, where the morning sun caught its blue curves just right. They had broken things, but I replaced them. Not because they deserved a second chance, or because I forgave the damage, but because I forgave myself for trusting they wouldn't break them in the first place. I stood back and let the light pour in. Some scars you carry. Some you frame. Some lessons in life don't come wrapped in apologies or sealed in resolutions. They come in silence, when no one shows up to explain, when closure isn't handed to you, and when the people who hurt you go on like nothing happened. But that's where you find your strength. Not in winning the argument, not in proving a point, but in rebuilding. Quietly, deliberately, for yourself. If you've ever given too much, stayed too long, or silenced your own needs just to keep the peace, then maybe this story is yours too. Maybe you've also learned that setting boundaries isn't cruelty, it's self-respect. And that choosing yourself doesn't make you the villain, it makes you whole. Now, I'd love to hear from you. Have you ever had to draw the line with someone you loved? Or reclaim something that was yours? Your peace, your home, your voice? Let's talk in the comments. If this story resonated with you, leave a 1 in the chat or tell me where you're watching from. I'd really love to know. And hey, if you didn't like the story, tell me why. Was it too close to home or too far from your own? Either way, thank you for being here. And if you want more stories like this, real, raw, sometimes messy, but always human, make sure to subscribe to the channel. Your support helps keep these stories alive. I'll see you in the next one.